So welcome to today's Greater Life CoffeeCast. And with today being Friday, a little bit more of a perhaps fun or alternative perspective today. The question we pose today is, what is your conspiracy? And I'm referring here to conspiracy theories, to something that you will either consider as pretty factual, in terms of some of the perspectives that the world of conspiracy theories offer, or you may be on the other end of the spectrum and think anyone who indulges in any of that kind of CRAP is deluded. And I think both perspectives perhaps have their limitations. You see, for many years there wasn't a rabbit hole I didn't dive deep down in terms of that conspiracy world. And there were many years when I was perhaps more evangelical about those conspiracies than, someone who's just come to God for the second time. I've seen the light. They're born again Christians who are so certain in their worldview that they're going to be saved and they want to save you. And, that was me running around telling everybody who'd listen, being super angry that the world was so inverted. And what I realized that it wasn't actually enhancing my quality of life in any way. So where I am now is that for me personally, a vast amount of what we see and hear in the world is utterly manufactured. However, the nature of that manufacturing, I think, is still a question I have. Whether it's some kind of shady cabal in a smoke-filled room pulling a load of strings, through to, some perhaps kind of non-human influence is, all of those things I think are in play. And the more that I have spent time actually almost focusing on myself, working out, what do I want? What is the kind of world that I want to live in? A lot of those outstanding questions become increasingly irrelevant. However, if the trying on of alternative perspectives, and I'm much more of a fan of that phrase than conspiracies, because I think it does down the incredible work of amazing, kind and beautiful-hearted humans who have dedicated years of their life to researching alternative perspectives, that to discredit and deride them as being deluded and label them conspiracy theories is an affront to human dignity. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about not necessarily answers, but I am passionate about the importance of questions being acceptable to ask. And so one of the old phrases in the whole alternative perspective world is that if you want to know what's really going on, look at what you're not allowed to question. And when I think of that, very often I think of the death of Dr. David Kelly, who was a whistleblower in the Iraq war here in the UK, who pointed out that Saddam didn't have any viable weapons of mass destruction and apparently committed suicide and was able to move his body even after he'd committed suicide, apparently. And then his autopsy results were classified for 75 years in the interest of national security. Those series of facts are fairly hard to stomach. And so we can see here a brave, conscientious human trying to do the right thing who was very clearly questioning the wrong things and was silenced. And so I think to be so quick to assume that there is no fire in the conspiracy smoke is a step beyond where someone who is open-minded, intelligent, curious, and caring should go, in my opinion. And a lot of this comes down to a discussion of sovereignty, of what does it mean to be in control of our own destiny. And by the way, if you can hear any strange noises in the background, those are my twin nephews who are about 18 months old, in the process of waking up. And so if we are to have sovereignty over our own destiny, over our own being, one of the first pillars, if you like, that we have to establish is the pillar of sense making. Because unless we can make sense of the world and of our place in it, then we are at risk of becoming pawns in the agendas and games of others. And I think this was evident in the Iraq War as an example, where we allowed the media to so totally capture the narrative that we didn't think twice to go and invade a country and essentially gather all their resources for our Western markets at the cost of millions of lives. And I include in that the 1 million plus civilians in Iraq and Afghanistan who lost their lives, the hundreds of thousands of more who then, as a result, suffered, and indeed the thousands of veterans from those wars in the US and America who subsequently committed suicide. To have done such poor sense-making collectively, to have allowed an agenda to be rolled out so blatantly, is a real reason why I think it's so vital to welcome alternative perspectives rather than deride them. And of course, in the context of the Iraq War, we come face to face with one of the great conspiracy theories, which is of course what happened to the towers on that fateful day of September the 11th. And here's a starting point, because my invitation was a bit more light-hearted, but as I flowed, I realised that there was actually something more on my heart to say about this. That whilst I'm far less evangelical about what the answers are, because they're much harder to come by, I think you can hear in my voice the passion for taking a stand for those who have been on the receiving end of the negative impact of agendas that we as humans might find an affront to our dignity, were we to pierce the veil of sense-making just a tiny bit. So my invitation today is actually to, both lightheartedly, but also knowing that there is some heart here, there's some soul here, to give yourself an opportunity, give yourself permission perhaps, and again this is an invitation, to take a look at some of those conspiracy theories out there, those alternative perspectives, be it 9/11, be it climate change is of course one right now that no one is allowed to question, which always makes me interested. Be it the Titanic, researcher by the name of John Hamer, done some fantastic work looking at some of the skullduggery afoot there. And have a look for yourself, open-mindedly. And of course the great question is, who benefits? If narrative A is true, who benefits? And if the alternative narrative is true, who benefits? And if we follow the money, who benefits? And very often, one of the reasons why these conspiracy theories, these alternative perspectives take root, is that when we follow the money, when we follow who benefits, across the sweep of the last 100 years or so, it tends to be some of the same wealthy presences in our world, some of the same kind of predatory wealth, factions, families, And that doesn't necessarily mean that's the answer. It just means that that is something worth noting. So, perhaps today, this weekend, my question: what is your conspiracy that you could spend some time with, getting to know as a good friend, and exploring whether it is something to be shunned and scorned, or perhaps is an alternative perspective that the world deserves to know about? All right. Have a great weekend.